Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Maximum Apocalypse Wasted Wilds from Rock Manor Games. Maximum Apocalypse is a post-apocalyptic 1-4 player survival game in which players are going through there's two campaigns in the box, and I believe there's some additional campaign content to work with some of your older Maximum Apocalypse content if you have that, so 2 full campaigns to go through, each one around 8 to 10 missions, as you go through a sequence of trying to have your survivors go through a mission, accomplish their goals, try to survive, rinse and repeat across the various missions until you get to the end of the game. That's the very high level, post-apocalyptic survival for 1-4 characters. Past that, the actual sequence of the game is you're going to have these characters over here who are wandering around the map. You're going to set up the map in every scenario based on whatever scenario restrictions or terms or throwing in whatever tiles, whatever things like that are going on throughout the course of the game. And then from there, what you're trying to do is you're going on this adventure, on this journey in which you have specific goals you're trying to accomplish. The mission you dive into will give you these specific goals. It'll give you these various placement tokens as far as where you're trying to go, because you're generally going to start off in the van over here, and then you're moving around the board, trying to interact with the various locations, moving from location to location, flipping locations over when you go ahead and reveal a new location, take the actions on them. Sometimes they'll have reveal effects, sometimes they'll have effects when they enter, sometimes they'll have effects if you stay there, and they'll have various things as far as, being able to search or scavenge from these decks over here, depending on the various icons you have in certain locations on the board. So you're moving around, you're engaging with the world, you're taking actions. Every character on their turn has 4 actions. You're going to use those actions. There's a very handy-dandy player that covers it. But basically, you're going to be moving around the board. You're going to be drawing cards from your deck on your turn. At the start of your turn, you will draw a card from your deck. But in case you want more cards, which you will want more cards, you have a hand size of 10 and a whole bunch of goodies to utilize, you can spend an action to draw a card. You can spend an action to take one of the various actions on the cards you have, and to get those cards, speaking of which, you can spend an action to play a card, so you can go ahead and get your aggro into play, so you can start shooting all the various beasts that are attacking you. Because when you're done with your 4 actions, again, very engaging, playing, moving, all that stuff, when you're done with 4 actions, the monsters on the board are going to attack you if they've already engaged with you. And monsters in this game is a loose umbrella term for any sort of enemy you are facing off against. Sometimes a monster is an elk, other times a monster is a person from another tribe, but the monsters are basically the code word for the things in the game that are trying to hurt you in some way or another, whether because they are peaceful animals who you wandered into the terrain, or whether because they're an enemy tribe that fears you just as much as you fear them, or whether it's because something actually is pretty toxic and wants to kill you. All of those will fall under the umbrella of monsters, and the monsters that you've engaged with along the way will start to attack you. For the most part, monsters in this game are going to be spawning onto the board. The first thing you do every single character's turn, is you roll these dice, and on every single, that's a 7 over there, let's ignore the 7 for a second. On every single card that has a number of 9, so over here for example, and over here, you'll spawn monster tokens, taking them and putting them into location. Now if it spawns on a place you are at, so for example over here we'll spawn a monster, but over here we have a character, which means instead of spawning a monster, we're going to engage a monster card with that character and throw a wolf in, engaged with the thief in play instead. Now engaged monsters are going to move around with you. Once the monster is there, once the monster is dealing with you, chasing you, whatever it is, as you wander around the board, it's going to continue to engage. You move and they move just like that. And so you're going to have to go ahead and take actions to eventually get rid of said monster before they continue to chip away at your health. Because once you're done with your turn, the monster are going to have their monster turn, which, as I said already, is going to involve them attacking you. Each monster in play is going to deal its damage to you, slowly chipping away at your health, and you want to try to make sure not to die, depending on whether you're playing with hard mode or not, or should we phrase that? Strictly speaking, when you play this game, you can have a character die and continue playing and still try to win. But at the same time, they recommend, or the game is balanced around, any character dying triggers the end game, so you want to go ahead and try to be mindful of your character's health and take down the monsters before they take you down. To that end, by the way, the thief actually has a lot of fun tips and tricks as far as how to get away from monsters without just, killing them. She's very stealthy and likes to throw them off her trail in any number of ways, so a lot of fun little card tricks up her sleeve. But again, the monsters will go ahead and take their turn and attack you. And then as well as that, a few things we didn't cover is whenever you go ahead and roll the dice to do that. And a minute ago I had the 7 here, and one of the reasons the 7 was not great is because normally on a typical turn, you're going to spawn monsters and then advance the dial by 1. But on a 7, you will advance the dial by 4 instead, 2, 3, 4, which is going to trigger effects along the way because this dial has 4 sides to it. On one side over here on the left side, you're going to have the monsters move. Monsters will move based on whatever arrow is on the top of their card, so the monsters for the most part are fairly static. but here and there they're going to move, throw you off, so you have to be mindful of the fact that they can and will move, although you can, for the most part, predict their movements. Past that, when you move to over here, you're going to have various terrain effects happen if characters are not sheltered. So characters in shelter, which both my characters are right now, are fine, but if you're not, you'll deal with whatever weather effects are in play. When you move over here, you'll deal with the night events, drawing a new card, placing it over, and then dealing with whatever new effect comes in. Sudden storm. Each player on an outdoor tile, that's not either of my characters, must discard an equipped gear or draw an exposure card. Very helpful that we're not an outdoor tile. Good thing we knew that was coming. And then lastly, when you move down here, you'll deal with any sort of various tribe effects. In this case, we have the Norse tribe in play. And that means this is going to slowly drift towards almost a set of neutrality, wariness. As they get angrier and irate and enraged with us, they're going to be more of a problem, but they do drift back down to wary. The flip side is, though, as we try to trade with them and engage with them to make them our friends, they will still drift down to wary because they are, after all, being mindful of their own survival in this post-apocalyptic wasteland. And that's basically the game. You're going to be taking 4 actions on your turn. Each character is going to go ahead. On the beginning of your turn, you're going to spawn monsters, possibly. You're also going to advance the tracker, dealing with any effects that will happen over there. Then you're going to have you're taking 4 actions on your turn. Any monsters that are engaged with you are going to go ahead and deal with you. You're also going to advance your hunger. One thing we didn't talk about is you'll advance your hunger die at the end of your turn. And you want to be mindful, because if you get too hungry, you'll have to flip over your character and start taking damage every single turn instead, while also losing your innate ability and possibly having some modified stealth adjustments too. One thing we didn't really talk about is there are ways to walk into a tile and try to roll for stealth so as the monster's not detecting you, although that's basically that. Past that, it comes down to the cards, the characters, the various things that will happen in every single game, but that is basically what's happening in Maximum Apocalypse Wasteland Wilds. You're going through a campaign progression system of post-apocalyptic survival as you attempt to accomplish the unique mission requirements that each mission is going to throw your way as you slowly go through it and deal with the various different things that the game will start throwing you, different types of monsters, different, rule sets. One of the nice things about this particular box is it kind of guides you through the rules a few missions at a time. So the first 3 missions will give you the main rules you need, and after that, it's just throwing you small little adjustments as you continue to go through it in terms of the new things you'll encounter. And that is Maximum Apocalypse Wasteland Wilds, which brings us to the review, starting off with the ease of play. Going to what I just said a minute ago, the ease of play on this is actually phenomenal. The ease of play is literally set up and start reading the rules. You can be up and running in 10-15 minutes from reading the rules because it spoon feeds you those things one at a time. You'll go through the first mission where it'll remove a bunch of things that kind of get in the way. Half this style over here will not really be in play. You'll only be dealing with the weather elements or whatnot. The rest is gone, and it slowly introduces more and more as you go through it. The one ding I will give it as far as ease of play is I found there are a bunch of things that just aren't 100% clear to me. The rules are very condensed in a way that makes the game easy to pick up and learn and start, but if you do have questions on specific interactions or specific even keywords sometimes, I find that it's not always 100% clear, and sometimes I just have to make a judgment call as far as how I think it goes, and at this moment, I'm still not 100% sure I'm right on all of those judgment calls, and maybe there's something else, but there's like kind of a learn to play book. There's not an official rules reference or anything else. There's a learn to play, which meant I definitely had situations or encounters or questions that I made a judgment call on. Nothing that got in the way of my experience, but certainly a small nitpick there. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with what I like. First of all, the variety of the player deck styles. And one of the things, actually, let's start with 2 things. The variety of the player deck styles and the fact that despite this is a campaign game, you can mix and match characters as you move from one mission to the next. Meaning you don't have to play the same characters the entire way through. If you want to go ahead and see how the beekeeper plays out and all her manipulation of the various animals that will help you out through the game, well, that's great. Start off with your thief and drivers I have here, and as soon as you want to mix it up, as soon as you feel you're starting to see what the decks give you, go ahead and mix it up with the next character. You can mix and match those characters, and they all have very unique feeling play styles in the game. They do feel significantly different from one another in terms of what they do, how the decks operate, their core competencies, their strengths in the game, and so the variety of player decks and the fact that even within a campaign game, you can see all those characters as you move through the missions, both of those offhand are already starting off strong. Past that, there's different decks of monsters you'll engage with as you go through the campaign. Different decks of monsters with either different rule sets or, again, different styles to them as you go through the game. And so that between the missions, there's just a lot of things to see. There's also different weather decks as well. There's all these different things that are going on in the game that give you a bunch of ways to approach the same engine. And so there's just a decent amount of variety to the types of stuff you'll see and engage with. And that's true of the tiles as well. As you go ahead from one campaign to the next, you'll have small differences to the tiles, giving you not huge changes to the feeling you have as you play, but definitely some more sense, more variety there. And that sense of exploration as you go through these tiles is there mission to mission. When you dive into the first mission, because of the nature of the game, you don't have to explore most of the terrain elements. So you kind of have to explore enough to get what you need done, to be able to find your fuel, your food, whatever the mission requirements are, to wander around to different locations, and sometimes you have to explore more than others. I had one mission that was, a 5 to 10 minute setup and then about a 7-minute gameplay because of the nature of the way the tiles were situated in the game, making me not have to explore that much and just getting lucky and just having a quick run through of a mission. And then I've had missions that took 45 minutes, 60 minutes to go through them and actually experience more, but you will not see every single tile in each mission, which gives you, again, reasons to continue to explore and to go through it from a sense of all these different things you're seeing in the game engine. As far as what I don't like in the game, first of all, despite all those things I just said about the variety, because those things are all 100% true, the one thing I would say, not the one thing, there's 2 small things I don't like. The first is that despite all the changes to the types of things you're seeing, the player decks, the monsters, the terrain elements, and all those things being different, the core idea of what you do on your turn is wander around the board, search, and then just try to survive against the monsters. Now, don't get me wrong, you can take any number of different games and condense them to some sort of very easy, very samey feeling system. Whatever the systems are, pick Kingdom Death Monster, pick, I don't know, whatever campaign game you want, Seventh Continent, and you can condense and make any one of those things feel like they're just the same old repetitive slog. But I will say that with Maximum Apocalypse, at least my own feeling of the game, the more I've played through it, that you are seeing different things and you're approaching them with slight differences, but it is a little bit on the lighter side, and going through campaign after campaign after campaign does start to feel a bit samey as you go through it. I think this is a game that works amazingly well as a one-shot, and I'd say more than that. I think this is a game that works great in terms of diving into it, 3 to 4 games at once, but then I don't know if I want to be diving into this 8 to 10 games in a row. I don't think it enhances I don't think the gameplay experience it's giving me is different enough in terms of what I'm doing that I want to continue to play this in 8 to 10 games chunks. For me, I kind of want to play it in 4 to 5 game chunks or 3 to 5 game chunks and then come back to it, 3 months later. The problem is if I'm doing that from a campaign stance, I will forget on some of the details of where I left off. Now, it's worth noting, there's not a ton of things as far as what you have to track from campaign to campaign, from mission to mission within a campaign. But there are small little things, unless you include the notes, it works fine. To me, I think, despite the fact that it's a campaign, I'm probably going to play this in small shots here and there, and maybe leave a note in the box that I have to keep track of that allegiances, whatever the small details are. For a full campaign, I think I'm less likely to charge through it. And speaking of allegiances, the second thing I don't like is I find the system of managing enemy allegiances is a fun little system, kind of, because you have these enemies that you have to engage with, and they're kind of enemies, but also kind of not. I would say I felt the system gave you a nice sense of variety to the way you engage with typical monsters in the game, but it felt a bit more like just kind of maintenance work to deal with those things. I almost would have just rather they be enemies and call it a day. Again, I'm torn because it does give you a sense of variety to how you engage with the baddies, but I didn't really feel like they were ever pure allies. If you get them high enough on the track, they'll even attack monsters for you, but it often requires a lot of maintenance to get them there, and for myself at least, I often found it was easier to just keep them at bay than really turn them into full allies, and so it's possible I'm not taking full advantage of them, but past that, yeah, it's a fine system, but a little tedious and a little maintenance based. As far as I can see others not liking, first of all, just luck left, right, and center in this game. Luck in terms of what you spawn, which tiles are where, or when you roll these dice, whether you have a whole bunch of monsters spawn that turn, or whether you can go 5 turns without having any bad guys spawn, or even just the fact that I mentioned a few minutes ago, like I had that one mission because of the way tiles were set up. I happened to get lucky and have like a 20-minute long mission and just called it a day and just won pretty quickly. There's definitely going to be luck in this. There's not really a luck in combat. Combat is actually pretty determinative as far as deterministic as far as the cards you can play and the ways you can deal damage in it. There's no rolling dice for combat, but there's luck in other areas. I would say it's a game that gives you enough strategy and enough difficulty that you do have to work your way through the puzzle, but also it is a game that is also a little bit on the lighter side with some of those elements of luck at play. And secondly, I'd say this operates best at lower player counts. This is a game that works, that's strictly speaking, it's a 1 to 4 player game. I'd probably recommend this as a 1 to 2 player game, maybe 3. Definitely don't think that it gives you enough rewarding stuff to happen to keep you invested on a 4 player game as you wander through other people's turns. As far as final thoughts on Maximum Apocalypse Wasteland Wilds, I went back and forth on the rating for this one. I have a rating system, 1 to 5 stars or whatnot. Stars, I've never called it stars. Just 1 to 5 is how I rate my games. And I find that most games obviously fall into that 2.5 to 5 range. Very few games are bad enough to call 2.5 or less, and they certainly don't get reviews. For me, I went back and forth between a 3.5 and a 4 on this one. A 3.5 out of 5 versus a 4 out of 5. And I did land on a 4 with a caveat. And as always, don't put too much stock into the number. Put more stock into the things I say. I really like what this game is doing. It is easy to dive into. It's fun. It gives you a sense of that post-apocalyptic, wasteland. It gives you that upgrading. The characters feel very different and very fun to go through. I really like a lot of what the game is doing. My biggest nitpick is the fact that it kind of is structured as a campaign system, and I don't think it holds my attention for the length and the duration of the campaign system. If I was grading this as a game, if this game gave me 3 to 5 mission campaigns, I think it would be an easy 4 to 5, not even a question. The only reason I hesitate is because it's a game that I both really like and also don't think I'll ever finish a full campaign in one shot. I'll kind of either restart when I come back to it 6 months later, or alternatively, I don't know how I'm going to engage with it yet. Even now, I don't know how this game is going to hold up and whether it sticks around or whether that campaign but not campaign throws me off my game. I really like what it's doing. It's very charming. It's very easy to dive into. It's a lot of fun, but it also doesn't hold my interest for 8 to 10 games in a row. So that's where I ended up on that one. Still calling it 4 to 5 with that just mindfulness around my thought process for the rating. Past that, as far as other game recommendations, first of all, if you're looking for another post-apocalyptic progressive campaign one-shot system, Waste Knights is going to give you another very similar, very similar vibes, very different mechanical execution as far as how Waste Knights operates, but if you're here for more for the setting and the theme, well, that's one that's definitely worth checking out. And then if you're here for the setting and the theme, another one I'd recommend with a very different style of play is going to be 50 First Date, a well-loved game that's had many reprints and different variations and expansions, but 50 First Date would be another one there. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.